What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you are all doing well and staying safe. And today I wanted to talk about Gibson SGs. This is my SG. This is the only one that I own at the moment. This is either a 22 or 23. 23. So this is a 2023 Gibson SG Standard. And you'll notice it doesn't have the big batwing guard on it like you see on a lot of SGs. This is actually a 61. It's modeled after the original SGs in 1961, where it has the small guard and then where the neck attaches to the body. This is actually farther out than what you would find on the SGs that have the big pick guard, or the modern SGs, if you want to call them that. And so I prefer these, and I'll get into why in just a minute here. But I wanted to make a video about why I think everyone should own an SG, and I'm going to give you guys 5 reasons as to why I think this is an essential guitar for any player. So jumping right into things, the first reason that I think everyone should own an SG is the comfort of the body. And so when you look at this guitar, I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, and this guitar is very scratched up, so it's been heavily gigged with, so you're going to see that. This is not a pristine instrument by any means, but the comfort carves here, they're subtle. It's not something like what you'd see necessarily on a Stratocaster or something like that, but it is very comfortable. It's not just like a solid wall like what you'd find on most Les Pauls and Tellys and things such as that. And it also has it on the front of the guitar, which I really like. So it's got it over here. I think that's more just a stylistic choice. But here, this actually serves as like a little bevel where your arm can rest on when you play. So I really like that about them. It's a small thing, but if you play guitar a lot or you gig a lot, this is a pretty comfortable guitar to play with, and so I wanted to point that out. The second reason that I think everyone should own an SG is the accessibility of the fretboard. With an SG, as you can see, there is nothing stopping my hand, even my pinky all the way here at the 22nd fret. There's nothing stopping me from just being able to easily access that. And so nowadays you see that on a lot of guitars, but when the SG came out, it was pretty unique in that regard. And what's interesting about the SG, this was actually made to replace the Les Paul. So less wood, obviously there's no big maple cap on here or anything like that. This came out in 1961, and it was originally called the Les Paul, and that's why on a lot of older SGs and reissues today, you'll see that the truss rod cover reads Les Paul. The problem is that Les Paul himself was not happy with that guitar. He didn't like it, and he didn't want his name on it. And so even though his wife at the time, Mary Ford, actually really liked the SG, and she had a SG Custom that she played for a long time, Les Paul didn't want his name on it. And so they eventually went back to the original Les Paul design, and this was released as the SG, or solid guitar. The Les Paul, the Explorer, the Flying V, all these guitars that you can buy today, they at one point were discontinued, and you couldn't purchase them new. That has never been the case with the SG. In some iteration or another, this guitar has always remained available ever since it was first introduced in 1961. That's pretty incredible. Reason number 3 is the sound of this guitar. And what I mean by that is that you can take the same pickup set in an SG and put them in a Les Paul, and maybe this is just me and I'm completely wrong, but in my head, when I hear those two guitars back to back, the SG is going to sound much punchier, much more aggressive. I think that's just because there's less wood here, significantly less wood when you think about it. Look how thin that is compared to a slab of mahogany and a maple cap like on a Les Paul. But a Les Paul is always going to sound a bit more dark and boomy to me, whereas an SG is a little bit lighter and punchier. You know, obviously think of Angus Young, AC/DC, but the SG is also so versatile. You can look at people like Derek Trucks. He can make this guitar sound like just about anything. I mean, I've seen him play other guitars, but 90% of the videos, if not more, that I see of him, he has an SG. This is his preferred instrument. There's just something about these guitars that is so incredible. SGs are definitely their own thing, so please don't overlook them thinking, I already have a humbucking guitar, I have a Les Paul, or I have an Explorer, a Firebird, whatever, I don't need an SG. These guitars definitely sound unique in their own way. That's not everybody's cup of tea. For me, I love SGs. These are also just so comfortable to play live. I know I'm kind of getting back into my initial reason for owning one, but As much as I love Les Pauls, that's probably my favorite electric guitar. The SG, just gigging with them and playing live, it's a lot easier to just kind of sling this guitar around. On that note, I will get into one of the negative factors about SGs real quick, and that is the neck dive. Because there's so little mass here, or at least it's so light, the neck is heavy on these. And so a lot of SGs, not all of them, but I'd say most, they tend to neck dive some. Now that can easily be corrected by just having a thicker strap. If you have a 2.5 or 3 inch strap, you're usually fine, and the way the weight is distributed, they don't neck dive. For me, they're so light that it's not really a big deal for me to use a thinner strap and just hold the neck up while I play. But if you don't want to do that work and you want it to be like most other electric guitars, just use a thicker strap and that will usually fix or at least alleviate some of that issue. Reason number 4 is the neck shape, and I think that this is pretty unique for Gibson at least. So the SG, I wouldn't say that it's pattern thin, but at least in my head, that's the closest thing that I can compare it to. So pattern thin is a shape that Paul Reed Smith refers to a lot on their guitars. And it's basically just a neck that is relatively thin, but it's wide. And so you have a lot of space here to play around with. So I'll use my little StewMac tool here. We'll unlock that and put it on the neck. So we'll start up here around the 1st fret. There's your neck shape, and I'd say that's pretty standard for most guitars, right? But we'll reset this guy, and we'll go down here to the base of the neck. That is pretty wide, and I think that down here is the reason a lot of people steer clear of SGs, because it's pretty wide. I mean, I'm stretching, I have smaller hands obviously, but I am stretching a good bit just to wrap around there, and I think part of that is just how the neck has to connect to the body, but also it was just for playability reasons that it was designed that way. All of the SGs that I've owned, I think except a SG Junior that I owned at one point, I think they've all had this neck, so very common on SGs, and it takes some getting used to. It's not going to be everybody's preferred neck shape, but once you get used to it and you can kind of dial it into your preference, it's great, and there's a lot that you can do on this guitar. Even if you're a shredder and you just kind of want to go all over the place on the neck, this allows you to do that much more so than something like a Les Paul would. And the last reason that I think everyone should own a Gibson SG is the price. This is the last thing that I talked about in my Les Paul special video that I put out, but compared to something like a Les Paul Standard or anything like that, these guitars are significantly cheaper. They're much more accessible price-wise, and I'll have to double check. I'll put it up on the screen from Gibson's website, but I believe these guitars are $19.99. And, you know, $2,000 is a lot of money to pay for a guitar, or as I like to say, to pay for anything. That's a significant amount of money. But comparatively, you're getting the same fit and finish, the same build quality. A lot of times you're getting the same pickup, same tuner, same electronic components, all that stuff, as you are in a Les Paul, that you might pay $600 to $1,000 or even more than that, more than you would pay for the SG. And so because of that, if you're not a big Gibson guy, but you're like, well, I want to own one and I want to have a humbucking guitar and Gibson's probably the way to go, get an SG. If you're a Fender guy, or for the most part you just generally prefer lighter guitars, the SG is probably going to be the way to go for you. Now, one thing that I haven't talked about yet that I want to mention is that even though the fretboard might be more accessible down here, that means that essentially Gibson has moved the neck out. And so one of the negative things about this guitar, along with the neck dive, is that maybe instead of your hand being here, it's down here. For some people, they cannot live with that. They don't want an SG. They avoid them because of that. That's a perfectly good reason to not want one. It's just something that I want to point out. For me, I don't really notice it too much. I mean, it maybe takes a second or two to just adjust and get used to it, and then I'm good. But for some people, especially if they just play and play and play on a Les Paul or pretty much any guitar, and then they come to this, it just kind of throws them out of whack, and that's perfectly understandable. But I did want to point that out real quick. I also think it's a really good time to buy an SG because for a long time, you could only get them in Heritage Cherry and Ebony or Black, at least if you wanted a standard USA production run SG. And so multiple times over the years, I would go to get an SG and I'd say, I guess I'm getting another red one, and I would get Heritage Cherry. But nowadays, they've got the custom color options, and you can get them in yellow, you can get them in white. I think there's a green that they have, and like a cardinal red or cardinal red burst, I think is what it's called. And then this guitar, this is my favorite. This is a Pelham Blue Burst. Now, I do wish that it had the blue on the back of the body, but that's a minor thing. I'm not looking at the back anyway. But I really like this guitar. Obviously, the black is going to show a lot of scratches and smudges, and I'm sure you're probably seeing in this video. This guitar has been heavily gigged with, but just the options that you have nowadays. And what's really cool about the custom color series is I don't believe those guitars cost anything additional. You can go and get them for the same cost as a red or a black SG, just like before. And those are my 5 reasons why I think every guitar player should own an SG. What do you guys think? Have you owned one before? Have you sold one? Never even tried one? Just let me know down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys stay happy, healthy, and safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.